Hey everyone, this is Mo Twister, and you're listening to the Kingdom Podcast with the voice DJ Yuki.
That was the OG, Mo Twister, promoting this podcast. If you like Korean pop culture, or know someone who does, then get into it, and visit our Facebook, Twitter and Instagram pages at the Kingdom Pod PH.
We're proud to tell you that this is one of the premier shows to go to for your weekly dose of K-pop. So drop everything and listen to the Kingdom Podcast. Available in all your podcast streaming platforms.
Join us!
This podcast is sponsored by Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. You can visit podmetrics.co and use my code, the THEMTGSHOWPOD. Welcome to your unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. This is the LTG Show Podcast. Okay, hindi na ako gagalaw masyado. So, it's Friday. And you know what that means. Welcome to your unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. And this is the MTG Show Podcast, a wrestling podcast. This is a very special episode. Supposedly, sa Cavite ko to i-record. But unfortunately, there's some conspiracy na nangyayari here sa amin sa Batangas. I have to stay here for 2 weeks more, and I have no choice. Andito yung backup studio, andito yung everything related dito sa podcast. I brought them here kasi I need them. Number 1, nagpo-pod ako, so why not? At number 2, podcast is life. So, kung magtataka kayo why this episode is very messed up, is because of that. Na naglipat ako, hindi ko pa alam kung paano yung magiging setup ko on the next few days. And I was figuring out for almost a week kung paano ko is-set up itong lahat ng to, from my equipment, itong mga stuff ko. Tapos dumagdag pa, nagka-problema pa sa akin kanina habang nag-umpisa ako. Almost 30 minutes din ako nag-check ulit bago mag-start nitong show. So, I have to apologize for the noise. You know, kung may maririnig kayo unnecessary noise, kung mawawala yung audio ko on this whole fucking episode. Episode 100 pa naman to. I have to apologize. I'm sorry. Kasi I have no choice. Kundi, I'm going to do backup plan on this. But regardless, on this week's episode of the podcast, we are going to talk about, of course, the AEW plus the New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door event. Plus, basically, kung yung mga naiwan natin from the past 2 weeks. And yung Impact Rebellion, we're going to talk about that pay-per-view in a bit. Personally, 2 weeks lang napanood ko sa Impact, but I had to predict this pay-per-view formally kasi I did this last year. So before we start this episode, I want to thank everyone who is supporting this podcast. Pasensya na rin kung nawala ako on last week. Kasi syempre Holy Week yon, and mandatory Holy Week break ko yon. Dito ako nag-Holy Week sa Batangas. So, I had to do everything in my power just to screw this up over. And it's kind of funny kasi ang hirap ng pag-aayos ko dito. Beginning of this 1 week to naging 2 weeks, naging 3 weeks. kong pag stay here and I have to figure it out para mas maayos yung magiging flow ko. And may mga stuff pa ako na ayusin and myself, siyempre. And kung magtataka kayo, ba't ganito yung setup ko ngayon is because nandito nga ako sa Batangas. And sobrang different ng setup ko dito. Kung makikita nyo, nakaupo lang ako monoblock. Tapos, nag-iisip-isip ako paano ko ayusin yung B8 ko, yung setup ko dito. It's so fucking sick. Sick to my stomach. Pero sige na, I'm going to repeat everything that we're going to discuss in a bit. So, Impact Rebellion, the predictions na mangyayari na on Sunday, Manila time, we're going to talk about that. And then the New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW's Forbidden Door event. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But before that, syempre, pasensya na ako nagrarant ako dito. First 5 minutes of this podcast, nagrarant talaga ako. Kasi, okay, so, let's do the formal way of this pod. Before we start, follow the podcast on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and on TikTok at THEMTGSHOWPOD, and then yung lahat ng mga stuff ko nasa linktr ko, linktr.ee/TheMTGShowPod. So, the MTG Show Podcast rather. And then, syempre, follow me on social media at AGPNera on Twitter and Instagram. And yung aking Patreon, syempre, na open as low as $1. Pwede kayong makatulong here on the podcast. Marami pa tayong aabangan stuff dyan. Marami tayong ilalagay na stuff. Lalo na sa mga susunod na araw na we're going to have a new season here on the show next month. So, marami kayong dapat abangan here on this show. And wala namang show format change. Hindi tayo magbabago. Okay na, sige na. Let's start with the breaking news. Earlier in the day, sobrang mainit pa to. So earlier in the day during Dynamite, they announced that we're going to have a Forbidden Door pay-per-view. So it's gonna be New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW in one pay-per-view. It will take place June 26, Chicago, Illinois. That's Forbidden Door. So Forbidden Door is officially a thing. Then, syempre pay-per-view to. So, in-announce to ni Tony Khan and Japan's president. Tapos, ang official na nag-announce nitong pay-per-view ay si Adam Cole. Dahil he believes na he worked best on both AEW and New Japan. So, that's why he did the announcement. No? Ganon yung explanation niya on us kung bakit siya yung nag-explain. So, he announced na on June 26, we're going to have a joint pay-per-view AEW New Japan for Forbidden Door pay-per-view event. And bitin yung thoughts ko sa TikTok, no? And I'm going to give my thoughts on that. Sabi ko, medyo warm na siya sa akin. I said that correctly. Tama naman. Warm na siya sa akin. It's kinda expected na ang hindi ko in-expect from this pay-per-view is si Jay White na magiging main character itong event na to. Siya yung mukhang panigurado magiging main character ng stories papunta sa Forbidden Door event, and definitely Adam Cole. There's two possibilities na nakikita ko on this event. Number one, we're getting Adam Cole and Jay White teaming up, and then later on, possible may magiging weak link on them, and maybe mag-lead ito sa isang face turn ng it's either sila yung UE o baka mag-turn dito ang Bullet Club, since there's a connection din. Pero marami pang possible eh. Tapos pwede natin sabihin din na ano ba tawag dito? Isa pang possible thing is during the build-up, since 2 months pa naman before the Forbidden Door event, pwedeng eventually mag-turn si Adam Cole o mag-turn si Jay White. And then instead of having teaming up, pwede sila maglaban. Bullet Club versus yung Undisputed Elite. Yun yung dalawang possibilities na nakikita ko right now on Jay White and Adam Cole. So that's why we're getting this event. So of course, this is probably a crossover event or a dream match event. So New Japan versus AEW. Yun ang possibility na mangyari. Let me know in the podcast platforms kung ano yung gusto nyong setup nitong pay-per-view na to. Pero sa tingin ko gusto ko yung yung counter by counter. It means yung face off kumbaga New Japan versus AEW parang Survivor Series. Pero mukhang hindi tayo tutungo sa ganong setup unless some matches will do that, some matches don't. Pero sa tingin ko ang gusto kong mangyari CM Punk versus Kenta syempre. Battle of the GTS. Tapos GOD versus FTR. At saka please give me yung Daniel Luzon versus any members ng any members ng LIJ like tapos basta LIJ whatever bigay niyo sa akin kahit sino o kaya si Osprey pwede din no problem as long as we're going to get that massive pay-per-view on June 26. Pero we're not going to talk about June 26 right now. Balik muna tayo on WWE. So, let's go to SmackDown and of course Raw. Medyo naiwan na ako. Kasi 2 weeks tayong 1 week tayong hindi nagpod. So, medyo kailangan kong i-summary lahat ng nangyari on this week's episode of the podcast. So, SmackDown and Raw. Let's start with the major announcement last week. So, we have a unification match for both SmackDown and Raw Tag Titles between RK Bro and Usos for WrestleMania Backlash. And ano bang gusto ko mangyari? For now, wala pa ako nakikitang palugit o dahilan o prediction na nafo-forecast o rumor na nafo-forecast about the future of this thing. Ang malinaw lang sa akin, they want the Usos to win this thing and maybe magkaroon na rin ng split between RK Bro, Riddle and Orton. Pero since popular din kasi RK Bro, mukhang malabo pa, hopeless talaga yung ending nun for now. And tapos, dagdagan mo pa ng senaryo yung nagyari nga sa SmackDown na kung saan ay tinalo ni Riddle si Jimmy. I think it's Jimmy Uso in a match. Tapos, ayun na nga, inaccept nila yung challenge for the unification thing. So, the unification is now official. Simple lang naman masasabi ko. Hindi ako fan ng unification ni Roman at ni Brock. Yung unification, quote-unquote. And definitely, I'm not going to be a fan of this unification, quote-unquote. For sure. Okay, move on tayo sa ibang spots. So, we have the summarized thing about Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. So, Sasha, I think it's Naomi. Naomi defeated Liv on SmackDown. And then, yung Raw, I think it's Sasha was defeated by Rhea Ripley. Tapos, on Raw, rematch for the tag titles. So, Sasha and Naomi retained the tag titles versus Liv and Rhea. After of the match, Rhea Ripley turned heel. Sobrang nakikita na natin to no WrestleMania pa lang. Nakikita na natin, forecast na natin yung heel turn. So, we don't need to explain longer. And I hope Edge will save Rhea Ripley. Titis na rin to few months back doon sa forecast na natin to before. Nung wala pang pod, nag-break ako. Forecast ko na to. So, we're going to look forward on the next happenings Kung tatanungin niyo naman ako kung sino yung gusto kong maka-next in line with the Raw Women's title kay Bianca, in it should be ano, if after kay Sonya, Sonya is kinda one time off for me. I think it should be Rhea Ripley then. Papabor ako this time. Si Rhea Ripley, malabo kasi si Carmella. To be honest, gusto ko din Carmella versus Bianca. Kaya lang sobrang hopeless yun. Hopeless situation siya for me for now. And then, syempre, isipin ko ba yung ganun? Hindi. Okay. Medyo we need to move on. So, Drew Gulak just made his debut on SmackDown as a ring announcer. Man, I'm fucking sad for this guy. Man. Seriously, I'm fucking sad for Drew Gulak na nag-debut siya on that thing. And also, LA Knight just made his debut as a, manager for Mace. As a, parang Robert Stone ng SmackDown gimmick, something like that. I love LA Knight's mic skills, alright? Sinasabi ko na to before you're on the show. I love his skill when it comes to mic. Pero, man, it's kind of disaster na ganito lang yung gagawin yung treatment on. It's kind of disappointing. Come on. Okay, singit pa natin na so Ricochet defended his Intercontinental Championship versus Jinder Mahal on SmackDown. We don't need to explain everything what is going on. And finally, isa pang thing na we need to look forward is yung eto. I'm going to give you guys immediate thoughts on this. Gusto ko malaman yung mga perspective nyo on this. So, si Madcap Moss is getting a push. No, he's getting a push after of that split with Corbin, Happy Corbin. And yeah, all people, di ba gusto nyo ng new face? Gusto nyo ng new star? Pinaggagago niyo ba ako? Ewan ko ganun mga mindset nyo. Ayaw nyo ng new star, pero ayaw nyo i-chew tong new star na to. I think Madcap is definitely a new star. For me, in my eyes, Madcap is great. I think meron ng konting kailangan ayusin sa kanya, pero definitely Madcap Moss is great. I don't have problems with him. Come on, people. Hindi ko alam kung ano ba yung problema nyo with Madcap. Pero definitely, ano ba maasahan ko sa mga inupak ko to? Okay. So, si Madcap sa tingin ko, ayos naman siya. It's not average. It's not your Drew. It's not your new Drew McIntyre. And definitely not your new Roman Reigns. It's just Madcap na he knows what is going to do. And damn, I'm looking forward for his run pa in WWE. Okay, let's go to Raw real quick. So Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins confronted each other before their matchup and on Backlash few weeks after to. Ano ba masasabi ko? It's kinda impressed ako on how they're building up this feud since this is their second match. And then nag-come on din si Rollins ng open challenge din for anyone na pwedeng kalabanin ni Cody on the roster. So mamaya malalaman nyo kung sino yung nag-accept ng challenge. And then, meanwhile, bago tayo maglingon-lingon, so let's talk about Beer Mahan. So, man, I fucking love Beer Mahan. I don't know why people hates him, but Beer Mahan, I'm impressed. So far, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they're on TV. I'm already impressed with Beer Mahan. I don't know if you all are impressed with Fear, but definitely I'm impressed with that guy. That's for sure. It's kinda useless to me na ganyan, ganon. Tapos, ano pa yung gusto niyong palabas about that? But it's fine for me. Meron pa tayong ilang araw para malaman yung totoong verdict ko kay Beer. But for me, for now, it's impressive. Kaya lang, after beating Dominic 2 weeks, it's kinda weird na nag-jobber match siya ngayong linggo. So, I'm not a fan of jobber matches. Then, okay, so let's talk about the KO show earlier on Raw sa Monday night nung Tuesday. It's basically ano eh, I fucking love this segment this week, the KO and Ezekiel and of course Chad Gable. Definitely one of my favorite figures in Raw right now is Chad Gable. Afterwards, of course, Ezekiel defeated Cable by disqualification. And I'm actually impressed on Ezekiel right now. Pero sana bago yung impression ko. Medyo mababaw pa yung impression ko kay Ezekiel. But magkakalaman tayo the next few episodes pa habang tumatagal itong show. Mag-observe pa tayo mabuti on Beer. Beer tsaka kay Ezekiel yung bagong gimmick ni Elias. Ayan. So, and then, important spoiler of course for this week's Raw is Austin Theory is winning and he won the United States title. So, ano bang masasabi ko? For me, I'm impressed with Austin Theory. I don't know why people are not impressed with him. I'm definitely impressed with that guy. Definitely, sobrang impressed ako on Austin Theory or Theory. Man, I don't know why people hating him right now. Aside from being heel, man, I don't think all deserves to hate him right now. I don't know. I don't know why you hate that guy right now. But I love his run so far. Yung sobrang long overdue niya on NXT. Tapos, dinala siya sa main roster. Naging protege ni Vince McMahon. Sa tingin nyo, hindi magiging long overdue yan sa inyo. Di ba nakakainis? Tapos, naiinis pa kayo sa kanya kasi binigay agad yung title tapos natalo pa ni Finn Balor. Natalo pa ni Finn Balor, rather. And I don't know why people hates that BS. But definitely, I love it. I love how they're pushing Austin Theory right now on the horizon. But let's see kung ano pa yung pwede nilang gawin kay Austin Theory. Then, so we're not going to talk about the wedding because the wedding is ang reason lang ko ba't ko pinanood yung wedding is R-Truth. R-Truth did a great job on that wedding. And finally, Cody versus a mystery opponent. The mystery opponent is Kevin Owens. So, after nun, nagkaroon ng altercation si Kevin Owens and si Seth Rollins. Ang weird panoorin. Ano? Ang weird nilang pagmasdan here on the screen. 10 minutes of the show. And they're doing a great job hitting each other. And I love how they are building the story ni Cody and the Rollins habang tumatagal yung WrestleMania Backlash. So, marami pa tayo dapat i-look forward on Monday night kumpara sa SmackDown. SmackDown is kinda tapon for me. And marami pa tayong dapat sundan on this week's podcast. So, for now, we're going to take our first break. And when we come back, we're going to do NXT and then AEW. Continue natin yung recap on AEW. And on the third half of the show, we're going to do a Impact Rebellion predictions. So for now, we're going to take a break.
Picture this. Two guys talking about true crime,
weird mysteries,
horror stories,
but the conversation is light.
and mostly funny.
And sometimes naughty.
This is Cripsilog.
A Spotify exclusive.
I'm Gideon.
And I'm Glenn, and we're serving huge portions of horror and true crime twice a week.
We'll make sure your cravings are satisfied.
And you'll be begging for more.
Char.
Check us out.
This is Cripsilog, available exclusively on Spotify.
Hey, if you're looking for some wrestling content here on Spotify, you can check out the MTG Show Podcast, a wrestling podcast only here on Spotify. Okay, so we're back on the podcast. I fixed somebody. Okay, I fixed something na di naman kailangan sabihin ko dito sa air. Okay. Bago tayo magpatuloy, we have to promote Lazada. So, malapit na yung 5-5 Super Brands Fiesta na mangyayari on May 5, 2022. And if you want to support the podcast on your shopping on Lazada, please use my link on the description below or podlink.co/6gs. Again, that's podlink.co/6gs. Gonna be a, malaking tulong sa akin here on the podcast, of course, with no extra cost to you. Okay. Let's go to NXT 2.0. So, NXT 2.0, marami din nangyari, no? We're going to do summaries of the episodes. 2 week summary to. 2 week summary, kumbaga, hindi na natin gagawin yung long recaps na ginagawa ko lagi sa podcast. Pero in this case, we're not going to do that. Instead, ang gagawin ko lang is, kumbaga, beats lang. Kasi mahaba. Mahaba masyado. So, number 1 is we're getting the next feud for the NXT Championship. So, they confirmed on this week's episode of NXT that the NXT Championship will be defended in 2 weeks at Spring Break-In between Braun Breaker, the champion, and Joe Gacy, challenger for the title at Spring Break-In. Spring Break-In. Tama. So, ayun, na-announce na yun earlier on NXT 2.0. So, di ba natin kailangan mag-predict dun? Pero probably next week, we're going to do the predictions after noong fallout natin for Impact Rebellion. And then, of course, aside from that, we got Natalya on NXT for 2 weeks na. So, Natalya is now part of the NXT brand as, of course, a part-timer na umatake kay Cora Jade. Sinabi niya na she is the future of NXT, but the future is bleak. So, afterwards, she attacked Cora Jade and she puts her on a sharpshooter. And on the match naman, debut match niya ulit on NXT after a long time. So, Natalya defeated Tatum Paxley in a one-on-one match. I don't know kung anong end nito, wala namang pake. Okay. And then, okay, so, on last week's episode of the pod, and hindi natin napag-usapan yung nangyari. Yung mga mangyayari sa Tag Titles. Hindi natin napag-usapan yun on the pod. Pero ngayon pag-uusapan natin kasi na-miss natin to. So, the NXT Tag Titles was vacated after of that Nash Carter incident. After of the Nash Carter release. So, they have to vacate the titles and now Nash Carter is released. And this, naman, in this case, Wesley is getting a face singles run that we're going to discuss in the pit. And then, ayun, so, we got a gauntlet match na ang nanalo dito ay Pretty Deadly. Pretty Deadly is the second tag team to win NXT and NXT UK titles after ng Mustache Mountain. Them. So after of that match, last week's NXT, so we got the split between Grayson Waller and Sanga. And nag-culminate yun on this week's episode of NXT. And so Grayson Waller defeated Sanga in a one-on-one match. Also, a must-watch from this week's NXT is Carmelo Hayes versus Santos Escobar. So thanks to Tony D'Angelo's staff, so Carmelo Hayes defeated Santos in a one-on-one physical match. I think this should be a banger for sure. And I love how they executed the story on this. So that's a plus one for me. Plus, yung na-official na din yung match, isa pang match for the North American Championship and Spring Breaking. It's Cameron Grimes, Solo Sikoa, and Carmelo Hayes. So speaking of Carmelo Hayes, let's talk about Grimes and si Solo Sikoa from last week's NXT. I was impressed on that match personally. Sobrang gustong-gusto ko yung laban na yun. But the triple threat is definitely a banger for sure. It's gonna be a must-watch pay-per-view worthy matchup na mapapanood mo lang on USA Network. Ano? Okay, so let's add the scenarios here for Natalia's return in NXT. So, after of the match versus Tatum Paxley, nagkinompronta siya ni Nikita Lyons. Lines ba? Lines. Medyo naguguluhan pa ako on this. I'm not used to this. So, Nikita Lyons, tama? So, she confronted Natalia after of the match and she challenged her in a one-on-one match. So, probably, bago kay Cora, I think, ang katalunan niya muna ay si Nikita. And ayun nga, like what I said earlier, so si Wesley is nag-debut as a solo star na he's still using the MSK team but same gimmick na broke after of that release. I think yung story dyan is broken, upset, down to down. Eh, tinalo siya ng Sayang Gwen. Okay. And then, speaking of debuts, so we got, of course, yung kay Roxanne Perez, aka Roxy, former Ring of Honor Women's Champion. So, Roxy, in this case, debut siya sa Level Up. And then, sa TV debut niya, she defeated Casey Jane because of guess what? Wendy Chu. Okay, we got Wendy Chu here, and definitely Wendy Chu saves the day for Toxic Attraction. And I love how the chemistry goes between Mandy, Toxic, and Wendy Chu. I was impressed on that segment. And then, so of course, we got the Pretty Deadly versus Dexter Loomis and Duke Hudson for this week's NXT. And sobrang flat niya sa akin. Parang naisip ko dito na lalabas yung Creed Brothers pero I guess they're saving that stuff for later. And then after of the match, so lumabas ulit si Joe Gacy. He was confronted by Braun Breaker. Kinuha ulit yung ring. But Joe Gacy demands a one-on-one match for the NXT Championship. Braun Breaker accepts the match. And now, ayun, tinulak siya ni Joe Gacy. Mula doon sa platform, pababa doon sa arena, floor, and then may sumalo sa kanya. Ayun, binuwat siya palabas. Parang creep. Parang may soldiers something. Parang may pagka Bray Wyatt something itong si Joe Gacy. I think it's kind of weird for me sa una. Pero habang siguro sasanay tayo dito, ginugroom siya as a killer Bray Wyatt. Killer Bray Wyatt for sure na hindi ganong kulto. Yung kanyang run, syempre. Hindi parang kulto. And ayan. Kakalawan tayo. Speaking of WWE, bago tayo lumayo-layo, let's talk about Kushida. Kushida is leaving WWE after of 3 years of his run in NXT. According to some sources, especially on Fightful, si Kushida expired na yung contract niya with WWE. So, probably magkakaroon siya ng no compete clause, pero mukhang 30 days lang yun, hindi 90. Kasi hindi naman din nag-main roster. So, malamang sa malamang it's 30 o wala. No? Ayun. So, I'm glad that Kushida, he didn't sign again with WWE. Sayang din naman siya dun. And I hope makabalik siya sa New Japan, malamang sa malamang as a heavyweight na, not a junior. And yan, marami pa tayong dapat abangan on Kushida. Also, speaking of leaving, Alexa Bliss is not happy on her role in WWE. So according to Fightful, hindi masaya si Alexa Bliss on her current run kasi parang upset siya sa booking niya and hindi niya gusto kung paano siya binobook. If kung ako si Alexa Bliss, aalis na agad ako ng promotion. Kasi kung ganito lang din kagago yung booking ko, ba't pa ako magtatagal sa isang kulungan o isang promotion na alam kong maiinis ako. Ganon lang dapat. Ganon lang yung mindset yan. And if you want the money, WWE money, of course, you have to stay, of course. Since may asawa ka na din naman. Speaking of, congratulations on your wedding kay Ryan Cabrera. And now she's calling herself Lexi Cabrera. So congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Cabrera. And regardless on that, you should leave WWE. And speaking of, +1 yun actually. If Lexi goes to AEW, definitely a big help on her role here in AEW. Malaking tulong siya sa women's division of the AEW. And ayan, +1. Syempre, if choice niya magstay with WWE, wala tayong magagawa. Right? Wala tayong magagawa for that. And finally, before we go to our impact predictions, let's talk about some Dynamite real quick. So we got 2 matches back-to-back opener for CM Punk. So first is the Punk versus Penta. Penta, no? Siguro ba? Salturo ba o Sulcuro? I'm not sure kung paano ibigkas yan. Basta I'm going to figure that out. So, Punk and Penta, definitely sobrang bagay ng chemistry nilang dalawa. Sobrang nangangasan ako sa chemistry itong dalawan to. I love this match. And also, I love his match this week versus Dustin Rhodes. Definitely a big banger for a matchup for this week's Dynamite. And kapag kukumparahin ko yung dalawa, I think it should be mas maganda yung kay Dustin. And after the matchup, we was confronted by his champion or the champion Adam Page. And then that's it is for a future feud with CM Punk and Adam Page. So, yun lang ang teaser na pinakita. And then of course, hindi ko na kailangan ulitin yung sa Chicago Forbidden Door event. And ayun, so we got last week's Dynamite, we got Jurassic Express versus Red Dragon. And Jurassic Express retains their titles. And then, kinompronta siya ng FTR. So, FTR is holding the Ring of Honor and AAA tag titles. So, probably a winner take all at Double or Not. Let's see. Since meron ding match, si Cash Wheeler, tsaka si Dash one-on-one. With the winner will be part of the Owen Cup tournament na mangyayari in May. There's a lot of qualifying matches right now for the Owen Cup. And yan, sabi tayo dapat abangan in AEW syempre. Then, Also, so konting recap din from last week. So we got Samoa Joe versus Minoru Suzuki. And obviously, Minoru Suzuki defeated. Minoru Suzuki. Samoa Joe defeated Minoru Suzuki on in a muscle buster. And after of the match, so lumabas Loki at saka si Jay Lethal and bibigay daw yung gift, but instead they give them a middle finger. And afterwards, lumabas si Satnam Singh. Okay guys, let's talk about Satnam nga. Kailangan ko habaan yung pasensya ko on Satnam. Pero according to our sources, si Satnam ay nag-debut dahil sa story nga na nag-merge na ang Discovery and Warner Media. So, they have to deal with that. Na-merge na nga yung dalawang networks. And since India is airing AEW on Eurosport, a Discovery Channel, kumbaga parang binibigyan na nila ng story na AEW is airing on that station. Tapos, ayan, ganun yung ginawa nila on Satnam. And maybe mga tulong din siya sa numbers for AEW. According kasi sa ating source, 5+ million ang nanood ng WrestleMania sa Saudi Sports Network. And on WrestleMania, after WrestleMania Raw, definitely ang laki ng tinaas dahil nandun si Beer Mahan. Si Beer Mahan ang nagsalba ng WrestleMania and ng Raw after WrestleMania sa Sony Sports Network. Sobrang taas na ang numbers niya. I think it's 7 million daw. 7 million. Pero I think definitely the WrestleMania is 5 million. Mga nanood ng WrestleMania sa mga bahay-bahay on their TVs by Sony Sports Network. Well, isa sa mga naging counter nila ng AEW is the Satnam Singh debut in AEW para makilala rin ng Indian market. And ano masasabi ko? Kasi dami ko ng explanation about Satnam. Sobrang flat ng debut niya. Sana ma-explain pa yung kanyang gimmick kahit na-explain siya last week. This week on Dynamite, sobrang kulang pa sa akin. Mukhang nakulangan pa ako on their explanation. And yun lang, sobrang kulang pa sa akin. So, also on Battle of the Belts last week. So, Sammy Guevara defeated Scorpio Sky and of course there's a double turn. Pero ang nag-turn lang sa American Top Team is si Man of the Year, Scorpio, and si Ethan Page and si Dan Lambert. So, that heel turn was a emergency heel turn according to our sources kasi medyo flat and medyo madami negative tinake ni TK yung opportunity for that heel turn, and definitely it's working for Sammy and Ty Conti. Yan lang. Well, ayaw na magsalita ng negative. Sana wag din kayo magsalita ng personal kay Ty Conti and kay Sammy about their families, about their shit, especially their personal shit. I don't want to see you guys shut the fuck up. Kung ayaw nyo maanuan, just shut the fuck up. Finally, so we get the coffin match main event between Darby Allin and Andrade in a coffin match. Di na ako nagulat dito. Darby wins kasi that's his match. And afterwards, lumabas yung hard disk. So definitely we're getting a hard disk versus Sting and Darby in the near future as part of their farewell tour ko na. And yun ang sinasabi nilang may farewell tour daw sila Jeff and Matt Hardy. Pero ayun, yun lang muna. Sobrang flat muna ako on Dynamite. Marami tayong dapat abangan sa mga susunod na episodes pa ng Dynamite. Lalo't mag-uumpisa na ang Owen Cup. So keep an eye on Dynamite and Rampage. Dahil marami mangyayari sa Rampage on Saturday. So, that's Adam Cole versus Tomohiro Ishii. Tapos yung title match, Marina Shafir and Jake Cargill for the TBS Championship. Plus, Daniel Garcia and sino nga ito? I think it's Eddie Kingston. Tama, Eddie Kingston. And many more. Manood kayo ng Rampage if you want some action. Action. Definitely a must watch this Friday on Rampage. So for now, we're going to take another commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to predict Hard to Kill Rebellion pay-per-view na mangyayari na this Sunday Manila time on Fight TV, on Sony Sports Network, Sony 10.2, and other platforms whenever you watch your favorite Impact Wrestling programs. So for now, we're going to take a break.
Get in, loser. We're going shopping.
I can't. I'm sick.
Weh, yung tataa.
Boo, you whore.
Di-lockdown pa rin.
Huh? 2021 na.
So, anong gagawin natin?
Eh di, magstay na lang sa house at makinig sa Astrology, the podcast. With new episodes every Tuesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
This podcast is sponsored by Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. You can visit podmetrics.co and use my code, the THEMTGSHOWPOD. Okay, so now we are here on the final part of the podcast. But before that, so syempre, let's promote Shopee. Malapit na yung payday sale on the 30th at 5/5 of course for Shopee. So if you want to support the podcast on your shopping on Shopee, please use my link on the description below at link.co/BHX. Again, that's podlink.co/BHX. It's gonna be a long run for me if you want to support the podcast without no extra cost. And of course, visit our linktr.ee/THEMTGSHOWPODCAST for more links, for more stuff here on the podcast. Pagbalik ko ng Cavite, probably we're going to do an attention to detail episodes, more ATAD episodes. So stay tuned for that. For now, we're going to stick with this kind of episodes. Habang andito pa ako kasi hassle. Hassle. Like what I said earlier in the opening, hassle. 5 minutes tinoon ko doon sa pagrarant about that. Okay, let's talk about Rebellion. Rebellion will take place on Sunday, Manila time, only on Fight TV and Impact Plus, tapos sa pay-per-view and on YouTube since they're using YouTube na as live provider in the US and some countries. So, we're going to talk about the cards on Rebellion. First, the Trey Miguel, Ace Austin, and Mike Bailey in a triple threat match in a three-way for the X Division title. Personally, hindi ko ganun nasusubaybayan yung reign ni Trey Miguel, but I'm impressed with his run so far. But I'm hoping that Mike Bailey will win the championship at Rebellion this time. Sana magdi lang anghel sana. Okay, and then next, the Influence team of Madison Rain and Daniel Dashwood versus the Inspiration, Cassie Lee and Jessica McKay for the Impact Knockouts Tag Team titles. This is very, very, very obvious. We want Madison Rain and Daniel to win the match. And then, so we got the Violent by Design rather, versus 7 other teams in a gauntlet match for the Impact Tag Team titles. So, as of today's recording, wala pa silang ina-announce kung sino-sino yung 7 teams. So, probably, i-confirm na lang natin sa social media pagka meron ng 7 teams na in-announce for the gauntlet. I think this is a gauntlet thing. And I'm sure we're getting a new champions on this. Pero I'm still hoping for Rhino and sana may pag-asa sila Rhino and tawag dito. Slater at si Rhino. Si Heat rather. Ayun. And sana mag-debut din sana sila no. Sila Edzo tsaka si W Morrissey as a tag team here in Impact. So yeah, ayan. Then, so main card, Chris Sabin versus Jay White versus Steve Macklin. Since this is a Impact event and kailangan ng momentum ni Jay White. So probably Jay White needs the win and Jay White will win this thing. And then, let's move on to Deonna Purrazzo versus Taya Valkyrie for the AAA Reina de Reinas Championship in a one-on-one match. The Ring of Honor Women's title is not on the line. So, may positive factor ako that Taya will win the championship para mawala na yung two belts thing ni Deonna. Pero feeling ko retain. May kutob din ako na mariretain siya sa Rebellion. Then, another counterpart, Tasha Steelz versus Rosemary for the Impact Knockouts Women's Championship. So, it's a easy bet for me since she defeated Mickey James, si Tasha Steelz. She really impresses me the most. And that's for sure. And then the Tomohiro Ishii tour continues. So, the Jonah versus Tomohiro Ishii in a one-on-one match. It's kind of hard, but I think Jonah will win. And then, Jonathan Gresham versus Eddie Edwards. Singles match. Supposedly, this is a Ring of Honor title match. But no, they changed it into a singles match. Obviously, it's gonna be, Gresham. And then finally, the main event of Impact Rebellion, Moose versus Josh Alexander for the Impact World title. This is the only feud that I think that I'm looking forward for Impact Rebellion. This is the only feud that matters on this year's Impact Rebellion. Aside on some stories, especially on W. Morrissey and Enzo, and other stuff here on Impact, definitely this is the best story on the pay-per-view. So, hard bet. Obviously, this is a hard bet for me, but safe to say, Moose is going to retain his championship at Impact Rebellion. So, let me know your predictions and mag-update din ako ng Preds once ma-drop na rin yung 7 teams na ni-reveal for Impact Tag Titles. Probably I'm going to do an updated predictions list for Impact Rebellion of once na ma-drop natin yung 7 teams. No? And then, let me know your predictions on all of the social media platforms of the FTA Show podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and on TikTok at the THEMTGSHOWPOD. Okay, it's time for the picks of the week. Obviously, the superstar of the week is Adam Page. I think that's a really good matchup between Adam Cole and Adam Page from last week's Rampage. And then, the woman of the week is Roxanne Perez from NXT 2.0. She's impressive from her debut to her NXT 2.0 TV debut. That's really impressive. And finally, the match of the week. No hesitation. This is a definite draw. There's Adam Page versus Adam Cole for the AEW title, and the Moxley and Will Ospreay thing from Japan's event from last weekend. So, Winter City Riot. I think it's Windy City Riot. Okay, yun lang. Yun lang for me on this week's episode of the podcast. This is the episode 100. Sorry, walang special ngayon. Probably yung special apps natin pagbalik ko na ng Cavite. So, for now, this is gonna be my episode number 100. This is a big milestone for me. na makapag 100 episodes tayo one day before my birthday. And I hope you all are safe. And definitely, maglo-look forward tayo sa 2 years and the second anniversary nitong podcast. And marami tayong dapat-abangan here on the show. So I want to thank everyone who is listening on this podcast since day one. And thank you sa lahat ng sumusuporta, sa lahat ng galit, sa lahat ng mga nakikinig. And syempre sa lahat ng sumusuporta here on the MTG Show Podcast. Again, thank you very much. This is a big milestone episode number 100. So, let's end this episode in a big way. So, follow the podcast on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and on TikTok at the MTG Show Pod. And then you can support the podcast by visiting our website. Every link is there. So, that's linktr.ee/the MTG Show Pod. And then you can listen to this episode every Friday on your favorite podcast platforms and on the podcast app. And then nga, patreon.com/the MTG Show Pod for more stuff. And of course, coffee.co/the MTG Show Pod. Please, baka naman, pa-coffee naman. And then nga, Twitter and Instagram at EG Pinera on social media and personal accounts. Please follow me there for some updates then. And yung mga stuff, dapat nyo abangan in the next few days. So, marami kayong dapat abangan sa akin and on this podcast. Kaya huwag kayong mag-iiwan ng mata kung saan. Please take your eyes on this podcast. Okay. That's it for this week's episode. Sensya talaga. Medyo nagme-mess up yung show na to ngayong linggo. This is gonna be a big mess if in-edit ko. Again, stay safe, stay raso. See you on the next episode. And please, on May 9, 2022, wag po tayong boboto ng magnanakaw at ng sinungaling. Stay safe. Episode 100 the Show Podcast. We're out.
A new world has come for the cinematic universe we live in.
Leave your belongings and make sure you're ready to enter in this new world.
This is Cinephiles, a podcast created by two self-proclaimed cinephiles who love talking anything about films.
Catch us every Wednesdays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. So join us as we enter to the new world of Cinephiles.